Not only are they getting an internal review, they're also going to get an external review. A distinguished panel of independent experts is how the Secretary of Homeland Security was describing the people who will take a closer look at that situation that happened on September the 19th when suspect jumped the fence and ran all the way across the north lawn, not just into the front door of the executive mansion, but through the ground floor of the executive mansion. So here's what we know so far and what we're standing by for to hear more from the president over at the White House. Julia Pearson, the director of the Secret Service, offered her resignation. The secretary accepted it. And as the acting director of the Secret Service, Joseph Clancy, a former special agent in charge of the Presidential Protective Division of the Secret Service, has been called back to serve the country after he had retired 3 years ago. And Secretary Johnson said he appreciated special agents. We just unfortunately lost the picture there. It's back, thank you, at the White House. His willingness to return from the private sector to public service on very short notice. He will now be the acting director of the Secret Service. Now, because of the reordering of the Secret Service in the days following 9/11/01, Secret Service went from being a part of the Treasury Department and is now part of the Department of Homeland Security. It's not the president, it is the spokesman for him, but I expect we'll hear from him on this. Let's listen in.
I apologize for the delayed start of today's briefing. It's obviously been a busy day for us here at the administration. I suspect that many of you have seen the statement from the Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson. In that statement, he noted that he had accepted this afternoon the resignation of Julie Pierson, the Director of the United States Secret Service. Before we get to your questions, let me just tell you that this afternoon the President had the opportunity to telephone Director Pearson to express his appreciation for her service to the agency and to the country. She dedicated more than 30 years of her life to the United States Secret Service and to the important work that they do over there. As I mentioned yesterday, she spent several hours in front of the cameras yesterday answering difficult questions from members of Congress. In the context of that interaction, she took responsibility for the shortcomings of the agency that she led, and she took responsibility for fixing them. And that, quite simply, I think, is a testament to her professionalism and to her character. So with that, Jim, why don't you get us started on questions today?
Thanks, Josh. In that phone call, had she already submitted her resignation, or did the president ask for it?
Yes, in a meeting earlier this afternoon, the director of the Secretary of Homeland Security met with Director Pearson and accepted her resignation at that time.
Now, as recently as this morning, you were expressing the president's support for her. If there was such support, why did the president allow Secretary Johnson to accept her resignation?
Well, Director Pearson offered her resignation today because she believed that it was in the best interest of the agency to which she has dedicated her career. The Secretary agreed with that assessment. The President did as well. Over the last several days, we've seen recent and accumulating reports raising questions about the performance of the agency, and the President concluded that new leadership of that agency was required.
Did the President take into consideration the mounting opposition that was rising on the Hill? Bipartisan opposition to her remaining in office?
No, I think what the Secretary of Homeland Security and the President were both considering were the performance of the agency. And in light of recent and accumulating reports about the agency, I think legitimate questions were raised. At least they were in the mind of both the Secretary and the President.
Does the President have a timetable for replacing her?
He does not. As you know, and as you probably saw from the statement that Secretary Johnson issued, the President recommended and Secretary Johnson agreed that Joe Clancy, someone who had served with distinction in the Secret Service until the summer of 2011, would be a good candidate for serving as the acting director of Secret Service until a more permanent replacement can be found. Mr. Clancy is somebody who had a distinguished career in the Secret Service. Prior to serving in the Secret Service, he graduated from West Point. But he is somebody over the course of his tenure at the Secret Service rose to the level of being the special agent in charge of the Presidential Protective Division. He is somebody who has earned the respect and admiration of the men and women who are his colleagues at the United States Secret Service. He is also somebody who has the full confidence of the President, the First Lady. So he is an appropriate choice to lead the agency until a permanent director is found.
If I could ask you about another news event today. The
Sure.
President met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Wondering if the President raised any concerns about new construction in East Jerusalem that some Israeli officials confirmed today, or the eviction of Palestinians from their homes in a neighborhood in East Jerusalem.
Well, Jim, I can tell you that the United States is deeply concerned by reports that the Israeli government has moved forward with the planning process in the sensitive area, or in a sensitive area of East Jerusalem. This step is contrary to Israel's stated goal of negotiating a permanent status agreement with the Palestinians, and it would send a very troubling message if they were to proceed with tenders or construction in that area. This development will only draw condemnation from the international community, distance Israel from even its closest allies, poison the atmosphere, not only with the Palestinians, but also with the very Arab governments with which Prime Minister Netanyahu said he wanted to build relations. It also would call into question Israel's ultimate commitment to a peaceful negotiated settlement with the Palestinians. Additionally, the United States condemns the recent occupation of residential buildings in the Palestinian neighborhood of Silwan in East Jerusalem. This is near the Old City, by individuals who are associated with an organization whose agenda, by definition, stokes tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. These provocative acts, these acts by this organization, only serves to escalate tensions at a moment when those tensions have already been high. The final status of Jerusalem should not be prejudged and can only be legitimately determined through direct negotiations between the parties. At this sensitive time, we call on all parties to redouble their efforts to restore trust and confidence, promote calm, and return to the path of peace.
So were those discussed?
This did come up in the conversations, yes.
And was there any indication that the timing of this was related to the Prime Minister's visit?
For questions about the timing, you'd obviously have to ask the Israeli government about that. Okay, Jeff?
Josh, back to the Secret Service. Clearly the problems at the agency are beyond one person. Would the President like to see more resignations, more firings as a result of these issues?
Well, Jeff, let me say a couple of things about that. The first is the President has nothing but the highest regard for the men and women of the Secret Service. These are individuals who are highly trained, highly skilled professionals who wake up every morning prepared to put their lives on the line to protect the First Family and to protect the White House. That is a commitment to service that is worthy of our respect. At the same time, as Secretary Johnson mentioned in his statement, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security will be conducting a review into the September 19th incident in which an individual scaled the fence along the north lawn of the White House and was able to gain access to the White House. That review will be conducted by the Deputy Secretary. When that review has been concluded, it will be put before an independent panel of experts to get their outside perspective on what changes to White House security may be required. That panel will also be responsible for making recommendations to the Secretary about who would be a good candidate to lead the United States Secret Service. They will certainly consider individuals from outside that agency. Importantly, they will also offer a recommendation to the Secretary about whether or not a review of broader issues concerning the Secret Service is necessary. So we are confident, and the President is confident, that the Department of Homeland Security will take a hard look at this situation, that we'll assemble a panel of outside experts who will take a hard look at this situation and develop a set of recommendations that will ensure that the United States Secret Service can meet the very high standard of performance that they set for themselves.
But does the president believe that more people besides the director need to go?
The president believes that an independent panel should review the results of this assessment that's being conducted by the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security to determine what steps are appropriate moving forward.
Does the president or the White House generally believe that any of the shortfalls or any of the problems at the Secret Service are related to shortfalls that are connected to sequestration?
Again, Jeff, you're raising questions that will be part of this broader, careful review that's being conducted by the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. So he'll be, after he's conducted his review, he'll be in a much better position to answer that question than I can from here.
Thank you.
Okay. Jim.
Josh, earlier this morning you expressed confidence and you said that the White House had confidence in Julia Pearson. What changed over the course of the day?
Well, obviously the first thing that changed, Jim, was that Director Pearson offered her resignation. She did so to the Secretary of Homeland Security, and she did that because she believed it was in the best interest of the agency to which she's dedicated the last 30 years of her life. The Secretary agreed with that assessment, as did the President. They both agreed with that assessment because of the recent and accumulating reports that raise legitimate questions about the performance of the agency. Those reports led the Secretary and the President to conclude that a new direction was necessary.
And just to ask you about this latest incident to have emerged, I guess it happened prior to the fence jumping incident, the security contractor at the CDC who was in the elevator, who was armed in the presence of the President in violation of Secret Service protocols. Did Director Pearson brief the President on that incident?
Jim, I can tell you that the White House first learned of that incident yesterday afternoon, shortly before it was reported before it was publicly reported by a news organization.
So she did not tell him about that, or the agency did not tell the White House about that until, you didn't know about it until yesterday?
Until shortly before it was reported publicly. That's correct.
And that's a problem, right?
Well, I think it would be accurate for you to assume that when incidents like that occur, that there would be a pretty open channel of communication between the United States Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, and ultimately the White House.
And does the President want to see the channels of communication to be more open, to be more transparent? Does the White House feel like it's kept in the dark a little bit too much by the Secret Service in terms of these problems that occur from time to time?
Well, I think this will be part of some of the things that this independent panel will consider. Is what is the appropriate level of Secret Service response to incidents like this when they crop up, and that obviously would involve communicating reforms or even information where necessary to senior members of the Department of Homeland Security, and again, ultimately, in some occasions, to the White House.
And does the President think that Julia Pearson let him down?
Well, like I said, the President took time out of his day this afternoon to call Director Pearson to thank her for her service to the agency and to the country. And the President is deeply appreciative of her service. She spent 30 years at the United States Secret Service because she believes so strongly in the core mission of that agency.
And if I could ask you one quick question about the CDC, because on September 16th, the President said, in the unlikely event that someone with Ebola does reach our shores, he used those words, unlikely event. And as we know, there's a case down in Dallas. Did the President not get, I guess, reliable information from the CDC as to the likelihood that Ebola could come over here? What do you make of that?
Well,
About it being an unlikely event.
Yeah, will you read that quote for me one more time?
He said, in the unlikely event that someone with Ebola does reach our shores, I can give you the full quote if you want it, but he talked about it being an unlikely event.
Yeah.
He went on to say that the CDC is prepared to deal with that.
Yeah.
That's
My suspicion is that you might be slightly overparsing what the President said, because when he delivered those remarks, there had been at least a couple of healthcare professionals who had been trying to provide medical services to Ebola victims in Africa who had been returned to the United States for treatment. So obviously these individuals who had contracted Ebola in the performance of their medical work were on the shores of the United States of America. So I think the broader point that the president was trying to convey to you and to the broader American public is that we retain confidence in the sophisticated medical infrastructure of the United States of America to respond to meet the needs of those individuals that have contracted Ebola and to put protocols in place that will prevent an Ebola epidemic from striking the United States. There are a couple of reasons for that. The first is Ebola is not easily transmitted. It isn't transmitted through the air like the flu. It is not transmitted through water or food here in the United States. The only way that Ebola can be transmitted is from the bodily fluids of an individual who is already showing symptoms of being sick with Ebola. So there are protocols in which the president does have strong confidence that can be put in place to prevent the spread of Ebola.
This doesn't lead you to think that this could be a bigger, more widespread problem than previously thought. I guess that was the thrust of my question initially.
That's correct. It is our view that we have the medical infrastructure that is necessary to meet to try to treat this individual that does have Ebola in a way that doesn't pose a significant risk to other patients in the hospital, to the doctors and nurses who will be caring for that individual, and certainly doesn't pose a significant risk to the broader community. Okay. Alexis.
Josh, a couple quick questions, just to follow up on what Jim was asking you. Based on the scenario that we understand from the Dallas patient, is there anything that's going to change with airlines or border security in terms of what we know about the incubation period or screening, free access and free movement of folks who fly from affected countries?
Well, again, it's my understanding, Alexis, and you can check with the CDC about this, but it's my understanding that the individual in Dallas who has been hospitalized with Ebola is somebody who did recently travel to the United States from West Africa. It is, again, according to those medical professionals, this individual was not displaying any symptoms, was not experiencing any symptoms while he was traveling. That means there is no risk to the individuals who are traveling with that person. So there are protocols in place where those individuals who are leaving West Africa and traveling to the West are screened. While we've also provided guidance to pilots, flight attendants, and others who make up who are sort of responsible for staffing our transportation infrastructure. We've given them guidance for monitoring the health and well-being of travelers to ensure that if they notice individuals who are exhibiting symptoms that seem to be consistent with Ebola, that the proper authorities are notified. There also are screening procedures in place at our border. So as individuals enter the country, they are observed by Customs and Border Patrol and others to protect the broader American public. So there's nothing about this case that we know so far that would indicate any weakness or any flaws in that system right now. But that said, in light of this incident, the administration has taken the step of recirculating our guidance to law enforcement agencies that are responsible for securing the border, to those agencies that represent individuals who staff the airline industry, and to medical professionals all across the country, to make sure that people are aware that there is an important protocol that should be implemented if an individual presents with symptoms that are consistent with Ebola.
And then back to the Secret Service, one follow-up on that. Because the independent investigation...
That is Josh Earnest, the presidential press secretary, confirming the resignation of Julia Pierson as the director of Secret Service. Of course, just before he went into the Brady briefing room there to make that announcement and to add the context of the president actually having called Pearson on the phone and thanking her for her 30 years of service. We heard from Homeland Secretary Jay Johnson, who announced that he was offered the resignation by Julia Pearson and accepted it, and he went on to appoint Joseph Clancy as the acting director. Mr. Clancy was the head of the Presidential Protective Service when he resigned from the Secret Service in 2011. He went into the private sector, but returned to head up the troubled agency today. Also heard a little bit about the Middle Eastern situation as involves Israel and also the Ebola situation. So a wide-ranging, as it almost always is, that White House news briefing today. The headline, of course, though, that the head of the troubled Secret Service offered her resignation. It has been accepted, and already there has been an acting director appointed. More live coverage for you here on News Channel 8. It's now 9 minutes before 4 o'clock. We'll take a break. We're back with more right after this.